Somewhere beneath the ever-moving surface of the ocean, there once existed a predator that did not hunt in the way we usually imagine. It listened. In water, sound travels nearly 5 times faster than in air, weaving through the darkness where light disappears after just a few hundred meters. And in that darkness, this creature could sense movement, not with its eyes, but through echoes returning to it. When it came close, it did not attack with a sudden burst. It approached with its own mass, a body reaching up to 15 meters in length, weighing tens of tons, along with teeth that could grow over 30 centimeters long, longer than a human forearm. Not to tear, but to hold, to lock. It was not a creature of myth, though it feels like one. It was a whale, bearing teeth on both jaws, shaped to confront prey nearly its own size. And then, a creature so perfectly formed for its world. Why does it no longer exist? The desert does not usually keep secrets of the ocean. And yet, in the scorched silence of southern Peru's Pisco Basin, a skull began to emerge from a cliff face that had not seen water in millions of years. It was enormous, misplaced, almost unnatural in its surroundings. This land had once been seafloor, warm, shallow, alive. Now it was dry, wind-carved, and still. What surfaced there in 2008 was not just bone, but a fragment of a vanished world, rising slowly back into daylight after 13 million years of complete silence. In 2008, a student walking through that desert noticed the skull eroding from the rock. What followed was not speculation, but careful excavation, measurement, and comparison. By 2010, the discovery was formally described in a scientific publication. The structure of the skull, the sockets, the proportions, everything pointed to a member of the sperm whale lineage, yet something far more extreme. This was not an unknown myth made real. It was a documented species, placed into the fossil record with precision, carrying a name that would soon echo far beyond paleontology. It was given a name that did not belong entirely to science: Livyatan melvillei. Livyatan, drawn from ancient Hebrew texts, a creature described not as an animal, but as something beyond defeat, something that lived at the edge of human understanding. Melvillei, a quiet tribute to Herman Melville, who transformed the fear of the ocean into literature. 2 names, one from myth, one from memory. Together they formed something unusual, a scientific classification that already carried the weight of a story humanity had been telling long before the fossil was ever found. What we know is grounded in stone. The skull is real. The teeth are measurable. The lineage connects it to ancient sperm whales. But beyond that, certainty begins to thin. We do not see it hunt. We do not hear it move. Its behavior is inferred, not observed. Between fossil and imagination, there is a narrow space, and Livyatan exists precisely there. The teeth are where everything begins, not just large, but disproportionate, some reaching lengths of nearly 36 centimeters, longer than a human forearm. These were not vestigial structures or secondary tools. They were primary weapons, solid, conical, deeply rooted into the jaw, built to withstand force rather than finesse. In the fossil record, very few predators possess teeth of this scale that are not tusks, and tusks are not used to bite. These were. Each tooth suggests pressure, resistance, impact, an interaction not with soft-bodied prey, but with something large enough to struggle and strong enough to fight back. Unlike modern sperm whales, where functional teeth are largely confined to the lower jaw, this animal carried a full set on both sides, upper and lower, aligned in a way that suggests contact, not avoidance. When the jaws closed, they did not simply meet, they interlocked, tooth against tooth, forming a grip that was mechanical as much as biological. This was not a system designed to hold something soft and slippery. It was built to restrain force, to resist motion, to to endure the violent resistance of prey that did not want to be caught, and might have been nearly as large as the predator itself. In biology, form is never accidental. Every curve of bone, every angle of a joint, every proportion of a skull reflects pressure, evolutionary pressure, repeated over millions of years. Predators that feed on soft prey evolve precision. Those that face resistance evolve strength. The architecture seen here does not suggest delicacy or speed. It suggests force, stability, and control. When multiple anatomical traits align in that direction, jaw mechanics, tooth size, cranial mass, it becomes increasingly difficult to interpret them as anything other than the signature of a predator built to overpower. At the front of the skull lies a structure, both familiar and enigmatic, the space once occupied by the spermaceti organ. In modern sperm whales, it functions as a biological lens for sound, focusing powerful clicks into the dark ocean. Livyatan likely carried a similar system, perhaps scaled to its size. It may not have needed speed to hunt. It needed awareness. In a world without light, the ability to perceive before being perceived becomes the most decisive advantage. 13 million years ago, the ocean did not resemble the one we know today. It was warmer, more expansive in its shallow regions, and far more productive. Nutrient flows were different, currents moved with another rhythm, and life, at nearly every level, was denser. Where today's ocean can feel vast and empty, the Miocene seas were crowded, layered with motion, filled with bodies large enough to shape the ecosystem around them. It was not just a habitat. It was a system that allowed giants to exist, not as anomalies, but as a natural outcome of abundance. Among the most important of these were early baleen whales, smaller than the giants we know today, but still immense by any standard, often reaching lengths of 7 to 10 meters. They moved in groups through warm, nutrient-rich waters, filtering vast quantities of plankton and small organisms. To an ecosystem, they were not just animals, they were moving concentrations of energy. To a predator, they were something else entirely. Large, relatively slow, and not yet shaped by millions of years of evolving alongside specialized hunters like Livyatan, they represented opportunity on a scale the modern ocean rarely provides. And it was not alone in recognizing that opportunity. Sharing the same waters was another giant, Megalodon, a shark of immense scale, built with a completely different logic but aimed at a similar outcome. Where Livyatan carried bone and breath, Megalodon was cartilage and motion. Two apex predators, shaped by separate evolutionary paths, converging on the same ecological role. They did not need to meet to compete. The ocean itself became the space where their presence overlapped, where pressure, scarcity, and survival quietly defined the balance between them. What we do not have is a record of them meeting. No fossil preserves a moment of conflict between Livyatan and Megalodon. No bone clearly marked by both signatures at once. The idea of their confrontation lives in possibility, not evidence. Science can confirm that they shared the same ocean, the same prey, the same time. But beyond that, the story becomes uncertain, balanced between what could have happened and what we can actually prove. In the ocean, light fades quickly. At a few hundred meters, it disappears entirely, leaving behind a world defined not by sight, but by sound. Water carries vibrations with remarkable efficiency, faster, farther, and with greater clarity than air ever could. For creatures adapted to this environment, sound becomes a form of perception, a way to construct space where vision fails. A single click can travel through darkness, reflect off distant bodies, and return with information. In such a world, the ability to listen is not passive. It is a method of seeing without eyes. For an animal equipped with such a system, the ocean is never truly empty. Every movement leaves a trace. Every body reflects a signal. A distant whale does not need to be seen to be found. It only needs to exist within range. Long before contact, before sound reaches the surface or disturbance ripples outward, detection has already occurred. The prey continues to move unaware, while something else has already mapped its shape, its distance, its direction. In that moment, the hunt is no longer uncertain. It has already begun. And then, at the moment of contact, everything becomes mechanical. The jaws close, not in a snap, but in a controlled convergence of mass and leverage. Upper teeth descend, lower teeth rise, and the two meet not edge to edge, but in overlap. Once engaged, the structure resists separation. It does not rely on tearing or slicing, it holds. The prey can twist, surge, dive, but the geometry of the bite absorbs that struggle. At this scale, force is not explosive, it is sustained, and once sustained, it becomes inescapable. The ocean rarely preserves the act itself, but sometimes it keeps the aftermath. Fossilized bones of ancient whales have been found marked with deep, evenly spaced gouges, consistent with large conical teeth. The spacing, the depth, the force implied, they do not point to random damage. They suggest intent, a bite that penetrated not just flesh, but bone. While no single mark can be attributed with absolute certainty, patterns emerge. And in those patterns, the outline of a predator begins to take shape, even in its absence. Around 14 to 12 million years ago, the rhythm of the ocean began to change. Temperatures did not collapse suddenly. They declined slowly, but persistently. Currents shifted, upwelling patterns reorganized, and with them, the distribution of life. Regions that once supported dense populations of large animals became less predictable, less concentrated. What had been a stable system of abundance began to fragment. It was not a dramatic event in a single moment, but a long transition, one that quietly redefined which forms of life could continue and which were bound too closely to the world that was disappearing. Specialization is a form of power, but it is also a form of commitment. A predator that evolves to target large, energy-rich prey becomes extraordinarily efficient within that niche. But it also narrows its options. When those prey become less available, less predictable, or begin to move differently across a changing ocean, the advantage turns fragile. Livyatan may have been perfectly adapted to a world of slow, abundant whales. But as that world shifted, its precision left little room for adjustment. It was not a failure of strength. It was a failure of flexibility. The lineage did not end, it changed direction. Modern sperm whales followed a different path, one that led away from surface hunting and into the deep. Instead of pursuing large, unpredictable prey, they descended into darkness, targeting squid that exist in vast, stable populations regardless of surface conditions. Their teeth became less central, their intelligence more pronounced. They traded raw force for consistency. In doing so, they carried forward the same anatomical foundation, but reshaped its purpose, becoming not the strongest hunters of their time, but the ones that could endure it. Long before Livyatan was given a scientific name, the ocean had already been described in similar terms. Vast, unknowable, and inhabited by something immense. In 1820, the whaling ship Essex was rammed and sunk by a sperm whale, an event so unsettling it blurred the line between animal behaviour and intent. Stories like this did not emerge in isolation. Across cultures, across centuries, there are recurring images of a force beneath the surface, large, intelligent, and beyond control. It is tempting to dismiss them as exaggeration. But what if they are not inventions, but echoes, distorted reflections of encounters with creatures just beyond our ability to fully understand? Fear does not emerge from nothing. It follows patterns, subtle, often invisible patterns shaped by limited information and overwhelming environments. The ocean, by its nature, restricts what we can see, compresses what we can understand and amplifies what we cannot explain. In such conditions, the human mind begins to fill gaps. It assigns intention where there may be none, exaggerates scale, extends shadows into forms. What begins as uncertainty becomes narrative, and over time, that narrative hardens into something that feels real, not because it is proven, but because it resonates with how we process the unknown. Across generations, these narratives accumulate, not as precise records, but as shared impressions. Sailors describe shapes beneath the hull, movements too deliberate to ignore, sounds that seem to follow rather than drift. Over time, details shift, but the core remains. Something vast, something aware, something just out of reach. This is how collective memory forms, not through accuracy, but through repetition. Each retelling smooths uncertainty into certainty, and even when the original encounter fades, the feeling it produced lingers, carried forward as a story that feels older than any single witness. What remains, after removing exaggeration and assumption, is something both clearer and more unsettling. Livyatan existed. Its anatomy is real, measurable, and consistent with a predator capable of targeting large prey. That much is firmly grounded. What lies beyond? Its exact behaviour, its dominance, its interactions, belongs to inference, not certainty. And the idea that it was something supernatural can be set aside. Yet even within those limits, the conclusion holds. The ocean once produced a predator unlike anything alive today. Not mythical, but not entirely familiar either. Somewhere beneath the surface today, a sperm whale descends into darkness, carrying with it a lineage older than memory. It clicks, listens, maps a world no human eye will ever see. It is not Livyatan, but it is not entirely separate from it either. What survives is not always what was strongest, but what could change. And what disappeared is not always gone without trace. The ocean does not keep stories in words. It keeps them in structure, in behaviour, in silence. Livyatan is no longer there. But in the shape of what remains, the outline of that ancient predator still lingers.